Zariah, your services are no longer required. 5 words. 5 words that landed harder than a hammer in the middle of the glass-walled boardroom. Ethan Reynolds said it like he was ordering his morning espresso, calm, smooth, rehearsed. He didn't even look at me. His gaze slid past, like I was a shadow on the wall. Invisible. I froze for a second. Just 1 second. And in that second, 20 years of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights flashed before me. All the nights debugging under flickering fluorescent lights. The cold takeout dinners shoved into my lap while I pounded out code at 2 a.m. The Red Bulls stacked like trophies. All of it, erased. Gone. Ethan leaned back, smirk pressed into his investor-friendly face. Sipping water as if nothing had happened. That's Silicon Valley for you. Look polished. Sell vision. Erase the builders. And for the first time, I realized I was the builder nobody saw. This is Malik Green, Ethan said, motioning to the doorway, and in walked Darius Collins. 26. Crisp hoodie. Sneakers so white they practically glowed under the boardroom lights. LinkedIn model. Forbes feature ready. Charisma over competence. Story over substance. He was the golden boy they wanted to see. And apparently, he was my replacement. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by that damn hoodie and shake him until he understood. But I didn't. I sat there, chest tight, hands clenched under the table. Because in the valley, truth doesn't get applause. Performance does. And Darius? He knew the performance. The boardroom felt suffocating. I could see the pity in some eyes. Fear in others. As if proximity to me might somehow make them vulnerable too. That's the thing about being erased in public. People step back. Pretend nothing happened, as if your existence was optional. I glanced at the wall. My first performance chart taped there years ago. Now, a glossy new PR poster. The future belongs to the bold. Bold. They thought it applied to them. They didn't know it was the boldness of people like me. People who built it all quietly. Who actually made it run. That kept this company alive. I collected myself. Walked through the endless hallway past coworkers unsure if they should acknowledge me. Most looked away. Some whispered. But I kept my eyes forward. One thought pulsed in my chest. They think they erased me. They're wrong. Back in my office, I pulled out my personal laptop. Not company property. Not tied to any server they could control. And there it was. My proof. My architecture. My adaptive routing system. Time-stamped and legally filed under my name. Patent applications. Commits. Notes. Every ounce of my labor that Ethan thought he could claim for his new golden boy. I didn't create it to start a war. I created it because I've seen this play before. Loyal builders always get pushed aside. Always. And this time, I wasn't going to be silent. I packed my things slowly. Carefully. Not because I needed them. My badge would be deactivated in hours. But because I was marking the territory of what was mine. I left behind nothing but a memory and a warning. That night, I walked through the streets of Oakland. Neon reflections bouncing off puddles from the lake drizzle. My community. My people. Black engineers. Coders. Students hustling to build futures in tech spaces that constantly underestimated us. I felt them with me. Even if miles away. All the silent warriors who had been told, "You're not enough. You don't belong here." All those moments of bias. Microaggressions. Assumptions made about what I could or couldn't do. They fueled me. I sat in my small apartment. Lights off. City buzzing outside. I opened a folder labeled Phase 2. Logs. Patents. Timestamped commits. Demo schedules. Everything. The proof that Zen AI ran on my work. Not Darius' Instagram-ready smile. The fire in my chest wasn't rage. Not exactly. It was focus. Cold. Deliberate. Like a storm gathering before it hits. And in that moment, I knew. The next move wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. Recognition. Empowerment. For me, yes. But also for everyone like me who had been quietly erased. Sidelined. Undervalued. I reached for my phone. Called Aaliyah Johnson. My mentor. My sister in code. She picked up after the third ring. Zariah? Her voice was cautious. They did it, I said, barely above a whisper. They tried to erase me. I know, she said, calm, steady, like she had seen it all before. They always do. We talked strategy. We talked truth. We talked community. She reminded me, you don't fight alone. You have a village. You have people who've got your back. And she was right. I wasn't alone. I never had been. By midnight, I had a plan. Not flashy, not public yet, but solid. Legal filings, journalists in our corner, community support ready to amplify every truth, every timestamped commit, every stolen credit, every lie we'd catch. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Exhaustion? Yes. Fear? Sure, but stronger than both. Empowerment. Clarity. The fire that comes from knowing. No matter how hard they try, no one can erase the truth, not if you hold it tight. Tomorrow, I would walk back into their world, not timid, not unseen. I would claim my place. And the world would see. Loud and undeniable, that Zariah King built this bridge. Not Ethan, not Darius, me. And that, right there, was the start of everything. I spent the next morning in my small Oakland apartment, surrounded by sticky notes, open laptops, and half-empty coffee cups. I wasn't just plotting revenge, I was building a network. A fortress of minds that could move faster than any boardroom could anticipate. I opened my encrypted chat with Malik first. You in? I typed. His response came immediately. Always. You know I've been waiting for this moment. Then Tasha. Count me in. Let's make history. And just like that, our group began to grow. What started as a trio quickly became 10. Then 20. Then 50. Young black engineers, analysts, UX designers, community organizers, people tired of being overlooked, underestimated, erased, people who had sat in meetings where their ideas were dismissed because of their skin color, their accent, or their quiet confidence, people who had learned that silence is a luxury we can't afford. We called ourselves the Vanguard. Not a company team, not a hackathon squad, a movement. Our first step was intelligence. We needed to know what Ethan and Darius were hiding, how they were spinning narratives, which pieces of the company they had claimed as their own. I dug into the internal documents, archived emails, project management logs. Malik ran the data analysis. Tasha built the secure channels. Jamal and Keisha coordinated outreach to allies in the tech world and our communities. Every piece of intel we gathered was another brick in our wall. The boardroom theatrics had taught me something crucial. Power isn't just in the title. It's in the story. And if Ethan wanted the spotlight, we would create one brighter, louder, undeniable. We started small, anonymous tips to journalists who had a history of exposing corporate fraud. Leaks to social media communities that cared about representation in tech. Carefully, strategically, the truth began to seep into the digital world. It wasn't loud yet, but it was consistent, persistent, impossible to ignore once the pieces fell together. I remember sitting back one night, watching a Slack thread pop up with names I barely recognized, college students from Atlanta, a UX designer from Detroit, a coder from Philly, all of them offering skills, advice, connections, mentorship. They didn't know me personally, but they knew the fight. And in that knowledge, they found a cause worth supporting. Empowerment isn't just about winning. It's about lifting others as you rise. I made sure every step of our campaign spotlighted contributors. Every victory was shared. Every setback analyzed together. Everyone had a voice. Everyone had skin in the game. And then came the first real test. Darius had rolled out a new leadership initiative to investors, claiming credit for innovations he hadn't touched. Screenshots of dashboards, glowing presentations, the usual Silicon Valley smoke and mirrors. It was polished, it was persuasive, and it was false. We struck back where it hurt most: credibility. Every email thread, every timestamped commit, every archived demo we had painstakingly preserved was compiled, verified, and shared with a journalist who had covered tech inequities. Within hours, the story began circulating in circles that mattered: LinkedIn groups, Black tech forums, newsletters reaching hundreds of thousands of professionals. Darius panicked. I could feel it through our sources. He sent threatening emails, tried to intimidate our Vanguard members. But the community we built was untouchable. Solidarity is a shield. When one voice is attacked, 20 rise in unison. We weren't just fighting for me anymore. We were fighting for every Black engineer and entrepreneur who had been told they weren't enough. fighting for representation, for fairness, for the acknowledgement that our contributions have value and demand respect. And as the story spread, a shift began inside the company. Employees who had stayed quiet, fearing retaliation, started speaking up. Small meetings, whispered conversations in elevators, messages under the radar. They confirmed what we already suspected. Ethan and Darius had built a narrative. But they couldn't suppress the truth when the people who actually made it possible began telling their story. I sat at my desk late one night, phone buzzing with messages from our network. Some were strategy updates, some were encouragement, and one, from Malik, made me smile. We're stronger than they think. This is bigger than revenge. This is justice. Justice. That word burned hotter than any anger I had felt in that boardroom. Justice wasn't about dismantling Ethan and Darius out of spite. It was about claiming our place, reclaiming our narrative, and showing our community that they didn't have to accept the lies that had been fed to them for years. Over the next few weeks, our operations became a rhythm. Daytime, I walked the corridors of the company, listening, observing, collecting breadcrumbs. Nights were for the vanguard, planning, coding, connecting, coordinating. Our strategy was simple: expose the truth, amplify the community, and remain untouchable. Every small victory reinforced the empowerment message. A journalist confirmed a report about misattributed code. A former colleague stepped forward, validating our timestamps. Social media posts started going viral, sharing the stories of Black engineers and developers who had quietly built the backbone of the company. The narrative was shifting, fast. And I knew, deep down, that Ethan and Darius had underestimated the power of community. They thought they could erase one person. But when one person stands, and their village rises behind them, there is nothing you can do to silence them. We had begun our fight. Not quietly, not subtly, not for personal glory, but for recognition, for fairness, for the Black professionals who had been writing the code, designing the systems, and delivering the results while the spotlight shone elsewhere. The war was just beginning. But the vanguard? We were ready. The morning sunlight in downtown Oakland hit the glass towers like a spotlight. I walked into the lobby of our headquarters with Malik, Tasha, and Jamal behind me. Each of us armed with more than laptops and notes. We had data, witnesses, and a community ready to testify. Today wasn't about whispers in Slack channels or anonymous tips. Today was about taking our movement into the open. We entered the CEO's office, Ethan's golden nameplate glinting in the reflection. Darius was already there, leaning back, a smug grin plastered across his face. He thought he knew me. Thought he knew all of us. He had no idea what we'd become. Morning, I said, voice calm, but steady, every word measured. We need to talk. Ethan raised an eyebrow. About what? About the truth, I said, tapping my laptop. Screens around the room flickered on, revealing timelines, email chains, commit logs, and presentation screenshots. Every piece of work falsely claimed, every misattributed credit, every manipulated report. It was all there. Undeniable. Darius leaned forward, face tightening. And you think this is going to? You think this is going to what? I interrupted. We're not here to ask permission. We're here to show you what the company really looks like when the people who actually built it take a seat at the table. I pressed a button. Suddenly, the room was alive with notifications, Slack channels, email threads, tweets, LinkedIn posts. Our Vanguard network had activated. Every name that mattered, every voice we had connected with, was amplifying the message. Truth, recognition, equity. Ethan's face paled. Darius slammed a fist on the table. You can't. This is corporate property. Property doesn't give you moral ownership. I said, we do. We, the ones who do the work. The ones whose ideas shaped this company. You can claim titles, but titles don't write code, manage clients, or innovate under pressure. We do. From behind me, Malik stepped forward. And we're not just speaking for ourselves. These voices? He gestured to the screens. Thousands of Black professionals who've been erased, underestimated, dismissed. They're watching, and they're listening. A collective murmur filled the room. On the screen, in real-time comments, people adding their stories, evidence, and support. It wasn't just a confrontation, it was a spectacle of empowerment. A storm made of community. Darius tried to regain control. This isn't how business works. Business doesn't work on lies, I said sharply. And this isn't just business anymore. This is accountability. And accountability is non-negotiable. I could feel Ethan twitch. The CEO who once prided himself on control now cornered by truth he couldn't spin. Every timeline, every proof of falsification, every supporting testimony we presented left him with nothing but excuses. Then came the boldest move. Tasha tapped a button, and our Vanguard members, those who had been mentoring, advising, and recording, joined the call live. Jamal streamed our walk into the office, showing the world that this wasn't a private grudge, this was a movement. Ethan's voice shook. You can't do this, public exposure. We can, Malik said, his tone calm, his presence commanding. And we already did. Transparency isn't just a buzzword. It's a weapon in the hands of those willing to wield it with integrity. I leaned forward. We're giving you a choice. Own the truth. Correct the record. Acknowledge our contributions, or we continue to mobilize, amplify, and escalate. This isn't revenge. This is justice. For us, for the people who built this company, and for the black professionals who will no longer accept invisibility as their status quo. Darius glanced at Ethan, his facade cracking. The room, once a symbol of hierarchy and intimidation, was now a theater of consequence. Every click, every notification, every new voice joining the call strengthened the tide against them. And then it happened. The board secretary entered, carrying printed statements from employees across the company, all corroborating our claims. The room fell silent. Even Darius and Ethan couldn't speak over the weight of evidence and communal support. I felt a surge of pride, not for myself, but for the network we had built. The Vanguard wasn't just a digital army, it was a statement. Empowerment is contagious. And when it spreads, it cannot be ignored. You've underestimated the power of people who refuse to stay silent, I said, and you've underestimated the power of our community. We are here, we are visible, and we are united. This is bigger than titles, bigger than offices, bigger than fear. Ethan and Darius exchanged glances, the kind that says we've lost control. And in that glance, I saw acknowledgement, not just of our strategy, but of the truth we embodied: fairness, equity, and the unstoppable force of a community that refuses to be silenced. By the time we walked out of that office, the first cracks in their reign were already visible. Employees whispered in corridors, allies reached out with resources, journalists followed up with requests for interviews. And outside the glass towers, our community celebrated, not revenge, not yet, but a victory of voice, visibility, and empowerment. The first strike had been delivered. And it was just the beginning. The morning after our first strike, the office felt different. The air buzzed, not with the usual hum of printers and fluorescent lights, but with whispers, side glances, and tentative smiles from colleagues who had once kept their heads down. Our Vanguard network had shaken the foundation, and I could feel it in my bones. We were no longer alone. But neither were they. Darius and Ethan were regrouping. The CEO's office had become a war room, filled with lawyers, PR consultants, and HR enforcers. They were planning retaliation, quiet, legalistic, bureaucratic, but we had something stronger: truth and community. I called a meeting with Malik, Tasha, and Jamal. We sat around a small table in the back of a coffee shop we'd claimed as our strategic hub. Everyone's eyes were fierce, lit with the same fire I felt. We hit them hard yesterday, I said, taking a sip of my black coffee. Now, we escalate, but smart. Direct confrontations will only work if we keep the narrative in our favor, and if our community is ready to back every move. Tasha nodded. I've got the team monitoring internal communications, social mentions, and media chatter. We'll know their next steps before they even take them. Jamal grinned. And our live streams yesterday? The traction was insane. People are actually following our story. We can mobilize quickly if we need to. Malik leaned back, crossing his arms. This isn't just about exposing them. It's about creating a culture shift. Showing the company, and everyone watching, that black professionals aren't just surviving, we're thriving. Demanding fairness, and taking ownership of our work. I felt the weight of it all, the stakes. The scrutiny, the risk, but I also felt a surge of pride. We weren't just defending ourselves. We were making space for every voice that had been silenced in this building for decades. By mid-morning, our next plan was set in motion. We had gathered testimonies from employees who had faced microaggressions, passed over promotions, and erased contributions. Each story was paired with evidence, screenshots, timestamps, and corroborations. And we went public, but with control. Not sensationalized, not vengeful, just undeniable facts. Our community rallied. Posts went live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and professional forums. Hashtags supporting fairness, equity, and recognition began trending. Employees across departments, many previously afraid to speak up, began sharing their experiences. Our movement was no longer hidden, it was impossible to ignore. Then came the boldest step, the first direct confrontation. Darius and Ethan tried to isolate me in a closed-door meeting, aiming to intimidate me, but I wasn't walking in alone. I had a small coalition of allies in the room, quietly documenting everything. We knew they wanted fear. We brought transparency instead. Ethan started with his usual charm offensive, a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. Let's find a compromise here, shall we? I leaned in, calm but unyielding. Compromise? Let's be clear. We're not asking for favors. We're demanding acknowledgement, and you're going to do it with the community watching. Darius scoffed. You think this is power? Power isn't in titles. I shot back. Power is visibility, and influence, and action. Look around you. Every person in this room who has been ignored. Every colleague who has been overlooked. Every voice silenced by your politics. They're here now. And they're not leaving. We documented every word, every hesitation, every attempt to gaslight or intimidate. And when the meeting ended, I sent a summary with timestamps to our Vanguard network. Our community was now directly participating in corporate oversight, not through confrontation alone, but through careful, undeniable transparency. By the afternoon, the office was transformed. Conversations in hallways shifted. Allies reached out, sharing internal strategies and resources. Black professionals who had once felt powerless now felt emboldened, energized. And then, the first tangible victory, an internal review board convened, forced by our evidence and public pressure. For the first time, Ethan and Darius had to face consequences, with witnesses ready to challenge every false claim, every unfair promotion, every biased decision. I looked around at Malik, Tasha, Jamal, and the colleagues who had joined the movement. The excitement was palpable. We were writing a new narrative, not one of retaliation for personal grievances, but one of collective empowerment, justice, and integrity. I thought about the community we'd built, the mentors, the advocates, the supporters who amplified our voice. They were no longer in the shadows. We were proof that when Black professionals unite, we can challenge structures that were never designed to protect us. And as I left the office that evening, I knew the battles ahead would be harder. Darius and Ethan wouldn't go down quietly. But neither would we. Every step we took was backed by a community that refused to be silenced. Every act of courage became a beacon for those still watching, waiting for a sign that fairness and accountability were possible. The strategy was working. The first strikes had become waves, and the tide was turning in our favor. I could feel it the moment I stepped into the towering glass doors of the headquarters. The building itself seemed to sense the shift. Walls lined with polished accolades suddenly felt hollow. Symbols of power built on fear and exclusion. Today wasn't just another boardroom meeting. Today was reckoning. Malik, Tasha, and Jamal were already there, mingling with allies we'd cultivated across departments, employees, interns, even executives who had quietly supported our movement. Our Vanguard network had transformed into a living, breathing force. Every person in that room carried stories of exclusion, of bias, of overlooked contributions. And now, they were armed with truth, documentation, and unwavering solidarity. Darius and the CEO, Ethan Caldwell, were waiting in the grand conference room. Their usual polished confidence wavered. There was tension in the air they couldn't mask. I could see it in the tight set of Darius's jaw, the quick glances between Ethan and his lawyers. I stepped forward, voice steady. Let's begin. The meeting started as any other might have. CEO opening statements. Rehearsed reassurances. Thinly veiled threats. But we were ready. Malik raised the first card. A compiled report of years' worth of microaggressions. Discriminatory promotions. And ignored initiatives. Screenshots. Emails. Internal memos. All laid bare on the conference room monitor. Ethan tried to interrupt, but Tasha held up a hand. Calm. Precise. No interruptions. This is your chance to listen. Darius smirked. This is theatrics. You think posting screenshots makes you powerful? I leaned in, matching his smirk with quiet intensity. It's not about theatrics. It's about accountability. And this time, you're not alone. Every person in this room has a stake. Every voice matters. Jamal started calling out names, introducing colleagues who had been silenced for years. Each one spoke briefly, powerful, unflinching, personal stories of injustice, some trembling, some confident, but all empowered by the support surrounding them. The room shifted. The CEO's polished veneer cracked. Darius's confidence faltered. Every interruption they attempted was met with collective affirmation from the room. Yes. This happened. Yes. We saw it. And yes, we demand change. I projected my voice. But it wasn't just mine. I felt the energy of the community propelling me forward. We are not seeking revenge. We are demanding fairness. We are not asking permission. We are claiming space. For us. For every Black professional who has ever been sidelined, erased, or undervalued. Then came the boldest move. We had set up a live stream. Not for the world at large, but for internal visibility. The network saw it in real time. Every employee witnessing the confrontation. Every ally reinforcing every claim. Transparency was our weapon. Ethan Caldwell's legal team tried to regain control, but the room held firm. Malik highlighted financial discrepancies hidden in departmental budgets. Tasha exposed procedural violations in promotions. And Jamal revealed communications showing deliberate obstruction of initiatives led by Black employees. The climax hit when Darius, cornered, attempted to gaslight the room, blaming miscommunication and misunderstood intentions. I stepped forward, pointing directly at him. Intentions don't erase outcomes. Lies don't erase lived experiences. You wielded power recklessly, and now accountability is in session. It wasn't just a verbal takedown. Our community had prepared a visual montage of our work, our contributions, our achievements that had been ignored or stolen. Screens flashed across the room, faces lighting up monitors. Every success denied finally celebrated in front of the people who had tried to suppress it. The room erupted. Allies cheered. Even those who had once feared speaking up now raised their voices. Applauding, affirming, empowering one another. The tension shifted into triumph. By the end of the meeting, concessions were made, promotions were reinstated, policies revised, and disciplinary action was initiated. Darius and Ethan, stripped of their usual defenses, were forced to acknowledge the consequences of their actions. I stepped back, letting the room absorb the victory. And then I spoke, not as an individual, but as a representative of the community. Today, this isn't just a win for me. It's a win for every person who ever felt voiceless in these halls. Today, we proved that together, we cannot be ignored. Together, we are unstoppable. Malik clapped me on the shoulder. Tasha smiled, eyes shining. Jamal nodded, pride evident in every line of his face. Around us, colleagues, new allies, long silent supporters, celebrated quietly but powerfully. In that moment, I understood the truth of empowerment. It wasn't about being loud or aggressive. It was about courage, solidarity, and strategy. About building a movement so strong, no single obstacle could resist it. And as I walked out of the conference room, I felt something I hadn't felt before. Liberation. Not just personal, not just professional, but collective. Every step echoed with the knowledge that our community had rewritten the rules. That injustice, no matter how entrenched, could be confronted and conquered by those brave enough to rise together. The war was over. The boardroom was ours. And in the streets, in homes, and across social feeds, our victory was a beacon. Proof that when Black professionals unite, justice isn't just possible, it's inevitable. The office lights reflected off the polished floors, But now, they reflected us. Strong, unbroken, empowered. The office smelled different that morning. The coffee machines whirring, the faint hum of computers, the shuffle of papers, all of it felt electric. Alive, like the building itself had woken up after a long, oppressive night. I walked through the hallways, hearing the soft chatter of colleagues who just a week ago had avoided each other out of fear or resignation. Now, there was a pulse, a rhythm that spoke of possibility. I found myself stopping outside a small conference room where Malik and some junior associates were huddled. Their voices were low, serious, but filled with determination. They didn't even notice me at first. I leaned against the doorway, letting them finish. When they looked up, eyes meeting mine, there was recognition, not just of me, but of what we'd accomplished together. The fight wasn't over, but the first victories had shifted something fundamental. A spark had caught. I realized then that the real work wasn't about Darius or the CEO anymore. It was about the culture. About rebuilding trust, fostering alliances, and making sure no one ever felt invisible or powerless again. That meant engaging every corner of the company, from the interns who were just learning the ropes to the middle managers who had watched silently for years. Everyone had a voice now, and everyone needed to feel it could be heard. Over the next few days, I began organizing informal meetups. Nothing fancy, just coffee in the break room, quick huddles in empty conference rooms, but the energy was contagious. People shared their experiences of bias, of feeling overlooked, of being dismissed because of their skin tone, their accent, their background, and for the first time, they shared not with fear, but with trust, with solidarity, and with hope. It was during one of these sessions that I realized how much we had underestimated the power of community. We'd fought Darius and the CEO. Yes, but what we had built together was something far larger, a network that could challenge systemic barriers, that could protect those who felt they had none. Malik was right when he said, "It's not enough to beat them. We have to make sure no one else suffers the same way." And I felt it in my chest, the weight and the responsibility of that truth. There were challenges, of course. Rumors spread. Some executives whispered behind closed doors, questioning the legitimacy of our coalition. There were tense moments when a misstep could unravel everything, when it felt like the old guard might strike back with subtle manipulations, paperwork traps, or meetings designed to intimidate. But each time we faced that, I saw people step forward. Not me, not Malik, not the few who had started this fight alone. Everyone. Their courage became our armor. One afternoon, I sat with Simone, a marketing strategist I had mentored quietly during the previous months. She was nervous, but resolute. "They still don't see us as equals," she said, "but they can't ignore us either." I nodded. That was exactly it. The balance of power was shifting. Not because we had screamed louder than them, but because we had acted smarter. Together, consistently. Every email that highlighted an overlooked project, every presentation that credited the right people, every casual conversation that affirmed worth, it all added up. The culture was bending in our favor. We began coordinating more strategically, using what we learned from previous encounters. Each move was deliberate, small wins in meetings, pushing for transparency in evaluations, celebrating achievements publicly. And every time someone in the community was recognized or defended, it wasn't just a personal victory, it was a statement. A statement that we were here, that we mattered, and that no individual, no matter how powerful, could silence an empowered community. I also noticed the subtle changes in the air. People who had been silent observers before now spoke up when they saw injustice. The interns, fresh-faced and cautious, began asking questions about processes that previously went unquestioned. Middle managers who had been quiet for years now offered suggestions and stood beside junior staff to ensure their work was visible. The ripple effect was undeniable. What started as a fight against a few individuals had transformed into a movement, a living, breathing community that demanded accountability, fairness, and respect. Even Darius's closest allies began to shift, not out of fear, but out of recognition. They saw the momentum, the unity, the confidence, and as their defenses wavered, the community didn't celebrate personal revenge, it celebrated empowerment. We had moved from reacting to orchestrating, from surviving to thriving, and in that transition, the office itself became a stage for change. Late one evening, I lingered at my desk, watching the glow of computer screens and the faint reflection of city lights through the tall windows. Malik walked past, nodded, and whispered, "We did it," and I knew, even though the final confrontation with the CEO and Darius was still ahead, that the groundwork, the real power, had been built. It was in every connection, every alliance, every person who had found their voice and refused to stay silent. That was the victory nobody could take away. The energy of the community was intoxicating. Emails weren't just information, they were instruments of strategy. Meetings weren't just agendas, they were arenas where equity was demanded. Even casual chats became exercises in solidarity, in reinforcing what we had fought for. And I realized, this was bigger than me, bigger than any single fight. The company had changed, not only in policy or process, but in the very heartbeat of its people. As the days passed, I began to document every move, every tactic, every victory, no matter how small, not for recognition, not for accolades, but as a roadmap, a blueprint for anyone who might walk these hallways after me, anyone who would face a system stacked against them. It was about leaving something tangible behind, proof that standing together, speaking up, and acting smart could dismantle barriers once thought immovable. And through it all, I felt something I hadn't before: hope. Real, palpable hope, not the naive optimism of wishful thinking, but the hard-earned hope born from struggle, solidarity, and resilience. We had fought, we had strategized, and we had survived, and the community that had risen with me was stronger, smarter, and bolder than any obstacle we had faced. That morning, I stood by the window, watching the city wake up, sunlight cut through the skyscrapers, reflecting off glass like a reminder that everything could change if you had the courage to act. We had been through intense weeks, going head-to-head with the CEO and Darius. But what I learned was far more valuable than any victory in a boardroom. Real power doesn't live in one person. It lives in the community you build. Looking around the office, I saw smiles and confident eyes, the same people who once stayed silent out of fear. Simone, Malik, and even those who were quieter, less visible, they had stepped up. They spoke. They refused to accept injustice anymore. We had created a new culture, one where every voice mattered. Most importantly, I realized that each of us is part of a bigger story, the story of fairness, opportunity, and empowerment. I remember in the beginning, feeling lost and alone. I asked myself, do I have what it takes to stand up? Now, I know the answer. No one has to fight alone. When you build a community, when you connect with people who share your goals and values, strength multiplies. This isn't just about taking on oppressive individuals. It's about changing systems, reshaping culture, and changing how people treat and see each other. One of the biggest lessons I want to share is this: never underestimate the power of small actions. And never stay silent in the face of injustice. A fair compliment in an email, a meeting where you defend a colleague, a conversation sharing your experience. Each act contributes to change. Small actions accumulate, like water shaping stone, until they create a wave that can't be stopped. We learned how to win with intelligence, preparation, and, most importantly, unity, even at the peak of tension, when Darius tried to manipulate. When the CEO threatened subtle punishments, we didn't just react. We were deliberate. Every move counted. Every situation became a chance for the community to recognize its own strength. And that, I believe, is the most important message. Victory isn't about taking someone down. It's about lifting the entire community up. To anyone listening now, especially those in the Black American community, here's my message. Stand up, find your allies, and keep fighting for fairness. Don't let anyone make you feel less capable, less powerful, or less important. Community, solidarity, and belief in yourself are your strongest weapons. If my story inspires you, do something today. Recognize a colleague's fairness. Stand up for someone overlooked. Share your own story so others know they're not alone. Every small act sets off a chain reaction. We don't just win for ourselves. We win for our community and for those who will come after us. And finally, Remember this. Empowerment isn't something you get once and hold forever. It's a journey, a process where you and your community constantly lift each other up. Fight for fairness, and make sure every voice is heard. If this story spoke to you, don't just watch, act. Like if you've ever faced unfairness and found the courage to fight back. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that they're not alone. Comment below and tell us, what's one way you've stood up for yourself or your community? Remember, every voice matters. Every action counts. Together, we can lift each other up, fight injustice, and change the culture around us. This isn't just my victory, it's ours. And the world needs more of that power. So hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications, and join us, because the fight for fairness doesn't end in one boardroom. It continues wherever communities rise. Wherever people refuse to stay silent. Wherever empowerment spreads.